All right. Hello, everyone. Had to break out the headset again. I guess my AirPods ran out of battery overnight. I don't know what happened there. So, anyway, those are charging. So hopefully you can hear me on this. For some reason, my system audio still wants to go through the system and not these, but I think this happened last time. I don't know why terminal sounds go through the internal speakers, but everything else should go through here. So anyway, let me know you can see me, hear me, all the good stuff in the chat. And with that, let's get started. So today I wanted to work on the CI generator. Again, just kind of these Wednesday live streams, just kind of taking a look at different things. So this week, kind of my main focus was going to be to update the CI generator to support pint. I think it's called pint is the proper pronunciation. Nuno has said many times that he names things as kind of a mashup of two things. So this is PHP and Lint. So you pronounce Lint as Lint. So I'm thinking it's called pint because he put PHP and Lint together. But the word itself is pint. So I don't really know. I'm going to say pint though. So just to be fun. So let's do this. Let's do a git checkout -b, add pint, and let's bring up PHP Stormsville. Let's close down some of these things. And while we're waiting on PHP Storm to fire up, let's say hi to everyone. Hey Mark, Samuel, how's it all going? Kuse, is Kuse? Kase? I don't know. Is that right or not? Let me know. Hopefully I said that right. Daryl, what's up? Philippines. Wow, I have not been to the Philippines. So, yeah, pint sounds way wrong. But whatever. That's what we're gonna call it. Let's bring up. So this is the CI generator. And I've wanted to work on the CI generator a little bit more. I think I built this about a year ago now. And it's something that's PHP focused, but of course Laravel, or sorry, Shift itself, kind of have a core in Laravel. So I like to optimize it for Laravel just a bit. So I think there's an opportunity here to when it's generating the different workflows to dump in pint for a Laravel project specifically. So there's two main things I want to do. First, I want to determine if the project is using pint with a pint.json file, and if so, then I would definitely want to add pint to the workflow. If you don't have, and then part two would be if you don't have pint installed and you're a Laravel project, or well, if you don't have any code style installed and you're a Laravel project, then I would go ahead and put pint into your workflow. And that's kind of some potentially future streams. I should be able to get that done today. But I think in future streams, some of the things I want to, again, revisit and add to the CI generator now that I've gotten some feedback is maybe having it not just look at what you have in your project, but then fill in blanks of what's missing. So for example, not only code styling for Laravel, since it's now kind of the default, but also maybe things like installing Larastan to your CI. Even if you don't have that configured in your project, maybe it just gives you kind of, again, a basic configuration. So I'm just looking for ideas, again, to kind of beef this out. I've gotten some feedback where people said, oh, I thought it would kind of add that for me even though I didn't have it. So, even though the wording on the website, says, hey, if you have this, it configures this and all this stuff, the generator name kind of makes you feel like it's going to put these things in your workflow. And I think there's an argument there. So anyway. So let's start with GitHub. I think GitHub's easier, and then probably off stream I'll add this to Bitbucket and GitLab and the sorts. So my daughter's home from daycare today because she's not feeling well. So if you hear some um, some wailing in the background. That's what it is. She is not feeling well, unfortunately. So, let's kind of re-familiarize myself or ourselves with this kind of stuff here. So, every task inside of Shift extends this task, and it has this perform method. So what we do inside here is we kind of immediately say, hey, is this service GitHub? Are you using GitHub for this project? If not, then it's not even going to generate you a GitHub workflow, of course. But if it does, then it's going to read the composer file, it's going to pull out some shared data for extensions, and then it's going to kind of create these different jobs. Now the job that we care about for today is going to be this create lint workflow. The lint workflow is what adds kind of like the PHP linter, just checking your generic syntax to make sure that there aren't any like missing semicolons or anything along those lines. And then also, if you do have a code style, if we detect a code style, then it's going to configure that as well. So this is the piece that we're going to focus on today. So again, let's kind of familiarize ourselves with this code, and then we'll jump over to the tests, and I'll kind of try to quickly update those. So what this does is it kind of has like a workflow file. It's just a stub, and then I basically go in and kind of tweak that stub based on the different things you have. So for example, if you have a bunch of PHP versions, then it's gonna kind of pull your latest version, and that's what it's gonna check against for lint, because theoretically, if you can run against the latest version, then you should be that should be the one you care about, so to speak. So actually, you know what? Now that I just said that out loud, I kind of feel like if you have multiple versions in regard to lint, you should be able to support the lowest version, meaning you're not using any advanced syntax in your higher version. That's kind of interesting. Anyway, I'll think on that off stream, but yeah, that feels, yeah, saying that, something about that felt wrong. Okay, so we have this detect code style, and basically here is where we're going to want to, again, let's kind of map out these steps. So step one would be detect and support pint, and then step two would be add pint if code style is null, right? But this is only for Laravel projects, not products. So we're going to try to do these two things. So let's start with this first one. Should be pretty straightforward. Hey, if we find a pint style sheet, we should be dumping that in your project, and then we'll add a test for the second one, which is if we don't find any style sheet, and you happen to be a Laravel project, then we would want to add that as well. Now, I don't know if we have anything in here that like detects if you're Laravel or not. That may be something we need to mess with. Let me look at this composer. Let's just see if we use this anywhere else. Yeah, so we are doing some stuff in here that's kind of like, hey, are you using Dusk? Are you using whatever? So we could quickly add something that based off composer says, hey, do you have a Laravel framework requirement? Okay, so let's jump over to the test, and we'll see how we get started here. So create GitHub workflow test, and let's just kind of go down the line here. So it does nothing when it's not GitHub, of course. It configures the latest PHP version for linting. Awesome. And again, I may tweak that later. Configures multiple versions. It configures single PHP version. Configures PHP. Oh, okay. So this is actually everything part of the project. So configures parallel testing, Dusk. It swaps requirement for PHP CS Fixer version. It swaps requirement for latest PHP 6, okay, and PHP CS. So it adds code analysis. Okay, so here we go. I think this one's going to be the closest to what we want. So let's borrow this, and we'll say it swaps requirement for pint, and then let's start with this test. Okay, so set up common expectations. What does this do? So we kind of expect it to do a bunch of these things. So it's going to return null for a lot of these. Okay, so I think what I'm going to need to do is in this, we're going to, I think for the time being, we're going to say, hey, if you go and look for a pint.json file, it really doesn't need to do like, we could really just do file exists, because to my knowledge, I don't think pint currently supports like these extra dists or anything without some kind of special customization. So I think we'll just leave that alone for now. So let's just say by default, it's going to return false for pint.json existing. We may or may not need that in our common setup, but let's just play it on here for a second. Okay, we're not going to mess with all these PHP versions, so I'm just going to kind of dump this out to be like 8.1. Okay, so the PHP version is going to be that. The shared extensions I don't think needs anything fancy, and then we're basically going to say if file exists, pint.json, then we would and return true here. And then here, let's change this to pint, and let's go like test PHP missing, whatever. I don't think we're focused on that right now. Let's go to PHPCS, I think is the one we borrowed. Okay, so let's take this and let's copy it and turn it into pint. And what this is going to look like for pint would be, we're going to lint it, we're going to set up PHP, we need to bump this version to that, and then instead of PHPCS, we would pull in Laravel pint, and to check code style, we would do pint, and I believe it's --test. Now by default, pint uses Laravel, but we found a pint.json file in this case, and as such, it's going to use that by default, because that's just the default name. Again, you might have a different config file. If so, I can beef that up for people that have a special one. But I think for now that is sufficient to probably make this test pass. So, okay, so let's fire up Docker and listen to my iMac explode, and we'll kind of see if this works. All right, cool. So what we're proving here, what we would prove here is not only that the PHP version would get bumped, potentially, but also that this is going to end up putting Laravel pint in and changing kind of this code style test. Now again, I fully expect this to fail right off the bat, but we'll get that running here in just a minute. I'm curious, we'll probably need to do an updated PHP one here since I set the version to 8.1. So I think let's just borrow this and say PHP 81. And let's just change that to 8.1. Everything else should stay the same. So let's shut that down while Docker's firing up. And let's, instead of this being PHP missing, it's going to be PHP 8.1, I think. Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh crap. I just hit Command Q. PHP storm. There we go. All right, let's shut that down. Uh-oh, I'm clicking so many different buttons here. Okay. We have the shift runner. Let's bring that up. And we're going to do vendor bin PHP unit. And where was I here? Let's bring this back up. Get a drink while we're waiting. Okay, let's borrow this test, and for giggles, let's just filter just this test. All right, let's let this run. Okay, so we've got an error, no matching handler found. Now these, unfortunately, these are kind of the old test cases. I'm not using my new kind of integrated approach. So we're kind of getting a nasty mockery error here that's basically saying, look, the put contents on lint 8.1 and then this code style being not PHP CS Fixer 3, it's not matching up, right? It's using PHP CS Fixer 3 and then running that here, even though it should be using lint, or pint. So I think it's an ugly failure, but it's actually a proper failure in this case. So we do have the version right, but our tooling is off. So let's just go start hacking on the implementation, because I do think, despite the ugliness, that is a good failure. Okay, so real quick, let's take a look at this file just so we can all kind of get a feel, of how that works. If I copy the right thing. So if we go look at the stub, by default the stub gives us this PHP CS Fixer and runs a PHP CS Fixer bit. So I could change this default to be pint, but remember, this isn't necessarily a Laravel specific shift. It's meant to be a general PHP CI generator, and as such, I don't want to go so far as to push pint as being the default. So what we need to do is, first of all, detect and support pint, and then here, if it's not null, we would end up changing that style out, or that tool out to be pint instead of PHP CS Fixer. So the first thing we want to do is let's do all these things that we're doing here, and then I think at the very end now we could just add an additional check to say, basically, if it's found, we could say shift file exists pint.json, then we would return pint. All right. So if you find that, then we know that we're going to run pint. So that's pretty easy there. So now it's a matter of going back to this, and let's add support for it. So I'm going to go ahead and kill that line there. Okay, so the lint steps, we collect all of the lint steps. Let's bring that stub back up. So we collect all of these steps. So each one of these steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. And we're going to reject the check codes. Oh, if it's null. Sorry, if it's null. Let's pay attention to the code. Okay, so if it's null, then we would actually dump out the code style step and then remove PHP CS Fixer. But it's not necessarily null in this case. It's going to be something else. So this is the part we care about. So we're still going to collect all the steps, and then we're going to map the setup PHP bit. So let's take a look at that. This setup PHP bit, we need to remap this tools section to be pint instead. So if name is setup, then we're going to string replace Laravel Fixer with the fixer that we found. Oh, this returns the fixer tool set. That's kind of interesting. So really this needs to return like Laravel pint is more appropriate. Okay, so that's going to automatically fix that piece, theoretically. And then else if PHP, else if fixer is PHP CS and it's check code style, then we need to update the run step. Okay, so that's this piece. So we need to kind of do the same thing here. So we would say else if fixer is Laravel pint, and it's a code style, then we would want to run pint -- test, right? It's basically what we want to do there. Right on. Okay, that's good enough. Let's see how our test looks. Okay, so our test looks exactly the same. So I think what that means to me is this common setup probably needs a bit more love. So I think what's happening is it's probably defaulting to PHP CS. So let's just kind of slow down and take a look at these. So if it goes here, it returns null, it returns null. Okay, here we go. Here's the problem. ls on PHP CS fixer by default is going to actually return a PHP CS fixer config. So it's never getting down to pint in this kind of setup scenario. So what we need to do is go back to our test, and we need to update our expectation now to kind of override that. So let's say and return null. All right. Okay, so if file exists with, oh, sorry, this is gonna, it's not gonna be file exist. Well, we have to override this exact expectation. This is why we moved to that like integrated testing layer, because or integration test, because this is like this is really cumbersome to like override all these and like really deep tested, you know, lots of conditional logic kind of stuff. It's pretty ugly. All right, so if we run the command ls, we're going to override that to now return null, which should allow us to fall through to this pint bit. So let's see if we get a little farther. Okay, no matching handler found for mockery expectation ls.php_cs. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, okay, so, okay, let's take a look at this real quick. So what's happening is, by default, I'm returning something here, which means that none of these other things necessarily need to be set up in the expectations, in the common expectations, because by default I'm always returning something from this one. So these shouldn't be set up in that common bit, and again, this is kind of nasty. So what I need to do actually is remove this. I don't want to put that in common setups, and we should run this whole test case here in just a bit, but to prove all this. But what needs to happen is I need to make this default null, and then I need to also kind of fill in the blanks here on the rest of this stuff. So if we look at this, the next thing I would need to do is search for this one, because I need to get it to fall through all of these different if statements. So next it's going to run the command, it's going to call that, and in this case I would return null. And then finally that should allow us to get down to the next one, which is pint, and in this case it is going to return true. So that should trigger it to return Laravel /pint, and now we should get a better test case. And we do, we're passing now. So all of that was really just some test setup, which again is a little convoluted because this kind of all happens in one task, just to make it a little easier to mess with GitHub, but it doesn't necessarily make it easier from a testing perspective. And so I kind of wrapped up, instead of rewriting all of these expectations, every single one of these test cases, I set up a common expectations per thing, but you kind of have to go read those before you start making a new test case, which is a bit rough. Okay, so this is passing. If we do find a pint.json file, we are going to configure pint for you. Let's make sure all the tests pass. I didn't mess up any other common expectations, and they do. So now we can go in and filter this next set. So I think this next set needs to be that it configures pint. So basically it configures pint for Laravel projects without code style. All right. And so what we can do here is it's going to be the same kind of test, but in this case, we would return false. We don't actually find pint for you in this case. But what we will do is say, when we read composer, inside of require, you're now going to have a dependency on the Laravel framework. And whatever the latest version is, not a big deal, 9.2.2, right? And it really doesn't matter. Oh, sorry, I was writing JSON there. It really doesn't matter what version of framework you are, because pint is actually a standalone thing. It's not necessarily directly dependent upon the Laravel framework. So theoretically, you could run pint against a 6, a 6.0 or even a 5.0 project. So this number here is kind of irrelevant. So anyway, let's run this test instead. So let's do -- filter equals that, and we should get a failure, which we do. In this case, it's actually removing the code style, which makes sense because we've fallen through all of our expectations and we didn't find a code style. So we're hitting that first one where code style is null, and we are now just removing that step completely. So that's our next bit of code here, and then at that point I think we're in a pretty good place. So let's see what's going on here. All right, cool. All right, so what we need to do now is this bit here. So what we could do is say first, if, so basically if is null fixer, so if fixer's null, meaning you don't have a code style configured, and this is using Laravel, or we could say something like is Laravel application, then we could override fixer to be Laravel pint, and then we know the rest of our code is going to play on correctly because we just added all that logic. So really all we need to do is go make this nice little helper method that's pretty similar to a lot of these other methods, where we could just say return, it's got to be require Laravel framework. All right, let's see if we pass. And we do. Let's see if all of our tests pass. And they do. Excellent. So that's pretty much it. If we add, we can go in and look at Bitbucket or GitHub or GitLab. Some of these other workflows just to see, but they pretty much look exactly the same. So that's something I'm going to add, but I don't know if there's much value in looking at that on stream. But I think we're all passing, and we've accomplished the goal of respecting if a pint configuration exists, but also adding one if you're a Laravel project, just because again it's kind of in the defaults now, and I think that's fun to add. The only other thing I wonder is if it's worth it to add a comment, kind of let them know, hey, you didn't have a code style, but Laravel, we saw that you're a Laravel project and whatever. So let's actually do that with the last few minutes of the stream. Let's add a little comment here to kind of make sure that that happens. So down here we'll subject perform, and then I don't know if I capture, it doesn't look like I capture a comment in here. This is kind of a crappy setup. Let's go find it in another test because I really don't feel like writing it. I think there's a capture in here somewhere. There we go. So yeah, let's just borrow, whoops, not that much. Let's borrow these lines and we'll kind of rewrite them here. So basically we'll say capture any call to add comment. It's a comment type info and basic, whoops, info, and we'll say something like shift detected, let's see, shift detected, you are, or you have a Laravel application, but do not have an existing code style. Laravel now supports, or I don't know, I don't really know exactly what to say here. Yeah, something like Laravel now adds pint to default projects to provide a seamless blah 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 whatever. So we'll kind of, I'll figure that out off stream. Nobody likes to watch a bunch of typing. Let's jump into perform here and at least add this comment, because we already have kind of this check. So we're going to set the fixer, and then we're also going to say shift add comment, comment create info comment, and this will be comment. Wow, I cannot type right now. Comment. There we go. Let's initialize that, and let's bring in our comment. I don't know why it didn't like that. And this will be something, again, I'll just make this pass for now. We'll just kind of add a to-do there, but it just is contained string, so this is part of it. So let's run this again, and we still pass. So just to prove we don't have a headshot here, let's just kind of drop that shift you have, and there we go. Shift you have blah blah blah, but doesn't have shift detected. Okay, so it's just a quick way to dump in a comment. Again, I'll kind of give this proper wording to demonstrate, hey, starting with Laravel 9, shift offers pint to allow, nice, seamless, cool Laravel first-party code formatting. So I'll figure out the way to say that. So in the meantime, let's jump out of here and let's do a git add-p just to kind of see what we changed. So of course we're going to leave a comment now. We added a little check here in our testing of different code styles, so we now support pint. We have a fallback that if you're a Laravel application, not only are we going to leave a comment, but we're going to default you to use pint. And then our little else if statement here to basically say, hey, look, if you did happen to be using pint, the proper command to run is pint test. So that takes care of that. And everything else was just a bit automatic. We just need to sniff out if they're using, or if they're a Laravel application, which they would have require Laravel framework. And then everything else is just our new tests, which we saw were passing. So I need to do this for Bitbucket and GitLab, but we've kind of laid the foundation now for these different things. So that's not too shabby. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and keep it a nice simple stream there. I'm going to keep working on, again, Bitbucket and GitLab, and we'll tweak that comment in the process. So I would imagine this is probably going to be available later today. So if you want to check out the CI generator, if you don't have CI running on GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, this will automatically configure workflows for you with all the stuff that it finds in your application. And now by default for Laravel applications, if you don't have pint configured, it's going to go ahead and kind of set that up for you in your CI. So that's pretty cool. If you have any other ideas for the CI generator, hit me up on Twitter. Otherwise, thanks for joining live, and I'll see everybody next Wednesday.